All right, today we're talking about Palmer Luckey. He's one of Silicon Valley's most famous and, let's be honest, most controversial prodigies. He's this fascinating figure who somehow lives at the crossroads of video games, virtual reality, and, well, the future of national defense.
And that really is the central question of his whole story, right? What happens when the kid who literally reinvented how we play video games decides to start building the weapons of tomorrow? It's a wild journey, so let's get into it.
So most of us first heard about Palmer Luckey as that classic tech wonder kid. You know the story. The homeschooled kid tinkering in his garage who ends up building a world-changing device before he's even old enough to legally buy a beer. And his rise was just insane. I mean, think about this. At 16, he builds the very first prototype of the Oculus Rift. By 19, he's launched it on Kickstarter. And then at just 21 years old, he sells the whole thing to Facebook for billions. It was the absolute definition of a lightning-in-a-bottle Silicon Valley success story. But after he left Facebook, Luckey did a complete 180. He took the exact same tech principles that powered all those immersive games and pointed them at a totally different arena, one with much, much higher stakes: modern warfare. And this move really shows you the two completely different worlds of VR. On one side, you've got VR for play, right? Fun stuff like Beat Saber, or even serious training for pro athletes. But on the other side, that same core technology lets a soldier operate a combat robot from miles away, or allows a pilot to run through incredibly realistic mission simulations. Same tech, worlds apart.
So he starts this new company, Anduril, and it's built on a really clear idea. As Luckey puts it, the human body just isn't designed for fighting. So his company doesn't waste time trying to build Terminators. Instead, they build these hyper-specialized machines designed for one specific task. Form follows function, period.
So you have to wonder, why would a tech billionaire jump into the defense industry? It's famously slow, it's bureaucratic. For Luckey, the mission was simple. He wanted to take on the incredible inefficiency and waste he saw in the Pentagon, waste that's ultimately paid for by US taxpayers. And if you want to understand just how big this problem is, just look at this number: $20 billion. That's how much military hardware Taiwan has already paid for from the US, but hasn't received because of delays. Luckey looks at a number like that and doesn't just see inefficiency, he sees a huge national security failure waiting to happen.
And he loves telling stories that just show how absurd the current system is. He talks about seeing the Secretary of the Army hold up this tiny piece of hardware that costs some insane amount of money. And the Secretary says, hey, my guys were able to 3D print this for $10. For Luckey, that's the whole point. It shows that even the top brass at the Pentagon are finally ready for a faster, cheaper, more Silicon Valley way of doing things.
So how exactly is Anduril going to fix this? Well, their game plan isn't just about building cool new gadgets. It's about building them way faster and way cheaper than the old school defense giants. For example, instead of designing a cruise missile that needs a brand new specialized factory, they're designing them so they can be built on the car factory assembly lines we already have. It's all about waking up America's sleeping industrial power.
Now look, this whole mission to shake up the American defense industry isn't just happening for the sake of it. For Luckey, there is a very real ticking clock, and it's driven by one massive geopolitical challenge: the industrial and military rise of China. Luckey points to this key strategy in China called civil-military fusion. And this isn't just some friendly collaboration. It's a national mandate where the entire private economy is integrated with the military. For instance, commercial shipping companies are literally required to build their car ferries to military specifications so they can be turned into tank transports on a dime. Their entire civilian economy is basically a military ghost fleet, just waiting to be activated. And the difference in industrial power is just staggering. According to Luckey, China has 300 times the naval shipbuilding capacity of the United States. 300 times. And while the US industrial base has been shrinking, China's is booming, with massive government subsidies in areas like electric cars, which, surprise, surprise, helps build up their capacity to make the machines of war. And Luckey thinks a conflict probably wouldn't start with some big invasion. He pictures more of a boiling the frog scenario. Here's how it would go. It starts small, maybe a trumped-up tax dispute. Then it gets a little bigger, a blockade of just one port in Taiwan. Then maybe a few more ports. Each step is designed to be just small enough that a huge military response would look like an overreaction. And by the time you realize the water's boiling, it's already too late. So you go from a VR headset in a garage to building AI-powered drones.
What is the ultimate endgame for Palmer Luckey? Well, as you might expect, his long-term vision is just as unconventional as the rest of his career. He said that one of his dreams is that when he finally retires, he's going to get a veteran badge, get deputized, and use his own money, his own plane, his own team, his own sensors, to investigate unexplained phenomena. He wants to be, and this is a direct quote, the government's privately funded X-Files. It's just the perfect image, isn't it? The computer kid who never, ever stopped being curious. You know, Palmer Luckey's journey from Oculus to Enderil isn't really just the story of one guy. It could be pointing to a much bigger shift, and that leaves us with a pretty heavy question. What really happens to our world when the brightest minds in technology stop focusing on building the metaverse and start focusing on building the machines of the battlefield?